Welcome. We are at Studio A3R here at ROC Vox in Rochester, New York. And as you know, Studio A3R has a program that's just based on 4 questions that we think are really, really important. Where have you been? What have you learned? Where are you going? And what is required? Before I introduce our guest today, I just want to touch base with our producer, Scott, and see what's going on. Scott, what's going on in your world? What new programs are you doing?
Oh, just the usual podcasts, e-learning, various videos. You know, somebody hired me to edit a wedding video that was about 15 years old. So that was fun. Haven't done one of those in probably about 10 years, but it's, there's always something new around the corner, which is what I love.
And don't you have a movie coming out in 2 weeks? So tell me a little bit, tell us, our audience, about this, because I'm going to promote it like mad.
Oh, beautiful. I love you. It's called Bottom Feeders. It's a comedy. It's sort of like a college comedy. 2 college guys who are just really trying to hang on to their mediocre lives. You know, they're not ready to be adults yet. And so it's just their daily hijinks, and the 2 girls who are basically trying to change them. And well, you'll find out whether or not they do, I guess.
And isn't there the guy from Party of Five? I just love Party of Five.
Yeah,
it's such a great program.
Our biggest name in the film is Jeremy London, who he's from Party of Five, Mallrats, and a lot of B movies. Great guy, great actor. He really should be doing so much more. But yeah, so and it's all the whole point of this movie was that we can do a professional looking feature film here in Rochester. We have the crew, we have the talent, we have everything that you need. So you don't have to go out to LA, you don't have to go to Toronto, you don't have to go to the big cities. You can do it right here in our, we have a big, small city.
Right, that's right. And as you know, Pixar does a lot of their animation with Rochester Institute of Technology. Mm-hmm. So it's really amazing. Well, I'm very excited, and I love what you're producing. I think this is show number 6 so far in our series. Is that?
I lost count.
Yeah,
I think it's 6.
6 or 7. I know now that we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, and we're also on Spreaker. So I'm really, I think you have to have a certain number of volume in order to be picked up there. So, and I'm still looking for NPR and 1A to maybe take a listen.
We got to make some phone calls.
Okay, we'll do that. We're getting ready. So what I love about, and as many of you know, I'm a Twitter maven and spend pretty much 4 hours a day on Twitter. It used to be mostly learning and connecting, and now I'm actually doing social media for 3 different companies. So that is why I'm on 4 hours a day. This is the first guest that I've had that I've actually never met before, but I have watched his work through Twitter, particularly with someone I do know, Brett King and Breaking Banks. And I've really just loved his, the quality of content that he shares is really rich. And finally, it got to a point where I wanted to say thank you. Well, his name is Jay Palter. I better say who he is at Jay Palter. What is your Twitter handle, Jay? Is it?
At Jay Palter.
Jaypalter. So I actually wanted to say thank you for all of the rich content. And in the process, we decided, come on, let's meet each other. And so here we are. And I just gave him a deep dive and said, listen, we just care about these 4 questions. So please introduce yourself and let me know where you've been and how it is that I met you on Twitter.
Wow, there's a lot to cover there. Well, I am Jay, and I've been Jay for now over 50 years. Let's just say that. So where did I come from? Oh my gosh. Well, everything started in Toronto, where I grew up, and my professional work has evolved in kind of a very roundabout way. But when you asked me where I came from, I thought, well, I started in Toronto, and I ended up in university doing a degree in philosophy, which you and I have in common as well, Jennifer. And that wasn't very practical thing to be doing. And as soon as I was finished that degree, I immediately rushed away from the ivory tower and felt like I needed to do something more practical in the world. So I found myself volunteering and eventually working for a global environmental organization trying to bring attention to the Great Lakes pollution. So I became an environmentalist and an expert in freshwater ecosystems and all of the toxic contaminants we're dumping into them. I spent some time in the Rochester area, around all over the Great Lakes region. And so I did that for about 7 years as a paid activist. Learned a lot. It was a very interesting experience, even from a technological point of view, because we were very advanced in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s in terms of technology. We were doing I wouldn't say social media, but we were using digital networking technology for coordinating our work all over the world. It was a very interesting time. And then I kind of found myself heading back into business, and got into web development, taught myself HTML. The story goes on and on. Eventually I made my way out west, and I'm doing now consulting for businesses, and particularly individuals, business leaders in their business settings, helping them build their social media presence, helping them build their thought leadership, and just learning how to do business and build relationships in online settings, which is increasingly essential in the world we live in.
Wow. And I love that you said, okay, there's this new virtual, I need to learn HTML. I need to learn the new language. Are there maybe 2 significant life lessons that you've learned as you've kind of seems like you've reimagined your value proposition and reimagined yourself? Maybe there's a lesson or 2 in that process.
Well, one of the guiding principles of my work has been this feeling that business is personal and is very social, right? I mean, we one of the common frameworks that I use when I'm talking to people about the value of social networking and social media is to look at, there's 3 kinds of capital that drive business and drive business results. One is financial capital, which we're all familiar with. I mean, we make investments in business, we build equity. There's various things we have to spend money on. That's a well recognized. There's human capital, so we have to investigate in people and their knowledge and their ability to deliver the products and services that we sell. We recognize that as important. And then there's social capital, and social capital is this element of relationships and goodwill that people have towards us, and who we know and who they can introduce us to, and what they can say about us. And those are things that drive business results as much as the other 2 forms of capital. And today, the digital networking world that we live in is very much, a world of social capital. I mean, the entire objective that I help people do is, how do you personally build social capital, which you can then convert, monetize, translate into all different kinds of value for yourself, professionally, personally, and for your business.
Wow.
So I've learned that. I've learned that social capital really drives business.
And anything else on like interpersonally in terms of that? I really love that and completely agree with that. And then I'm just wondering if there's anything that you had to do differently in terms of your own. How did you frame yourself to be an influencer worthy to be followed, if you will?
Well, that's an interesting activity to talk about, because I think a lot of people want the influence. But it's the kind of thing you don't really assert of yourself that you're an influencer. It's something other people have to say of you and of the activities that they observe that you performing, whatever you do. The way that I learned how to do that in business and social networks in a modern way was curating and sharing content. So it's interesting that you framed our meeting and our connection around content, because I really do believe in this world where there's too much information circulating out there every day, and we can add value to that raw material, which, I mean, in its the quantities that are out there today, it's very hard for people to discern, real value, real truth, real wisdom. And so if you go out and help find the best content that you are aware of, and you bring it to people's attention, that has huge benefits for you as a conduit, as a guide, as a filter of too much information. And it's very valuable for your business. It's very valuable for your personal network around you. And I've really internalized that. I mean, I do that every day as part of my day-to-day activities, because it's the way that we communicate, right? I share things filtered through my lens, and people pick them up. There's a signal there that's being distilled that you picked up. And I've met lots of people online for the same reasons. I'm attracted to them because of the things they share and the way they frame them. And they're attracted back to me because they see something that they're interested in. And so we find each other through the signal that we're generating in the world. And that's not necessarily something you just, you're born knowing. I mean, it's something you look around and see. You have to adapt to what's happening in the world today.
Wow, that's wonderful. In our space, there's a gentleman, I'm not sure where he teaches, but his name is Clay Shirky. And he has this amazing quote. I see you nodding your head, He says, the issue today is not information overload, it's filter failure. The issue today. Yeah,
Clay many times.
Yeah, isn't that great? And so
I love
I love. So in a way, you're creating a filter, and you're a trusted filter. And I value. It's great. I value you very much, and we connect very much on that space, which is really, really cool. So if you think of how you're adapting to this new model. I think that a lot of people are talking about this being a season, not a storm. And I say, no, it's an era. It is not a season. It is not a storm. So how are you pivoting and building resilience right now?
Pivoting and building resilience, I would, I've focused my own personal work for much of the last decade around social networks. And then all of a sudden, we have a pandemic era that we're in, and I agree it's changing a lot of our basic behaviors. And one of them is we're not having as many in-person meetings, and we have to learn how to have relationships and discover new people. I mean, the joy of going to an event in real life, and I keep running up against this when people do these online virtual conferences. I mean, the last thing any of us would think of doing is sitting in front of our computer all day, listening to people talk. And when we go to events that in person, that's not what we did either. I went to so many events where I never went to very many of the presentations. What was the most valuable part was the chance meetings in the hallways, between sessions, after sessions. I used to have a podcast called Between Sessions. It was actually, that's where all the exciting conversations were happening, right? So I think the pivot or the transformation I think I'm making is really to sort of help people recognize and to help them embrace this new era, because we have to learn. I mean, there's really no choice. I mean, I used to say, I've said this for 5 to 10 years, and there was no urgency. Now there's this kind of urgency that we need to learn how to have relationships, build social capital, get to know people. I mean, have intimate relationships. I mean, business is about people knowing each other, shaking hands. It's about trusting somebody. So we need to learn how to do that in a digitally mediated environment. More importantly than ever before, right? It's a survival tactic today. I'm not saying it's necessarily ideal. I'm not saying it's not great to get on a plane and go to an event and see people in person. It is. Yeah. But we don't have a choice today. We have to learn how to continue to have those kinds of relationships, because those still drive, they drive so much of our lives, business and personal. Yeah,
it's such a great point. I'm actually preferring to speak to people on the phone. I don't want to deal with the eye contact thing. I miss eye contact, and I don't want to look at a screen so that someone can see the pupils of my eyes. And, it's just a crazy thing. Scott, I'd love you to join us and think, is there anything resonating for you right now?
This whole conversation is resonating with me right now. And, there's something wrong with my camera, so we'll have to cut that out.
No,
that's okay for the live part. So building these relationships, it's interesting that you bring that up, Jay, because it's definitely something that has fallen by the wayside over the last, more so this year than over the last couple of years, but still in the last 5 years, I've noticed that you really have to, because of how busy and how separate everybody is and what they're doing, you really have to go kind of over and above what you used to have to do to have meaningful relationships with people. I love the idea of your podcast, by the way. That's brilliant, because I agree with you that the best things that ever happened at any of the conventions that I went to ever was always the mixers, the little gatherings, the break times, rather than the actual the speaker.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And there's a program that I'm helping facilitate, and they were just talking about the fact that they had some great speakers that were upset because they had paid a lot of money for the speakers and no one was actually at the speaker session. So it's like, you get the speakers to get people to come, but people actually come for the community, which is such a brilliant thing. Do you, are you reconsidering a new podcast, or is there any way to revitalize the between sessions? Because as Scott was saying, that is really provocative and really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm considering another podcast idea, but it's probably not quite that topic. It is interesting. I mean, look, we all talk to each other anyways when we get together. But the thing about a live event that I find compelling is you probably do too. It's not so much the people you meet only by chance. It's the person who introduces you to somebody there that they know, and that's been the most valuable experience I've had at events where you know a few people and they introduce you to a whole bunch of other people. And but the interesting thing about social networking is there's a whole bunch of events I wanted to go to that are probably not going to happen now for a couple of years anyways, where there was 50 to 100 people who I never met in person, but I knew they were going to be at this event because I know them on social networking. And I have some kind of a relationship with them building over the last several years. And I was going to go and meet them. And in the last few years, that's what I've been doing, is I've been going to these events, meeting people that I know from online activities that I had not met in person. And, I think that's just the way, that's the way of not even the future anymore. It's the way of the now. And, business leaders and any individual who's, doing business, who's working, who's engaging, in the same way you maintain your friend relationships on social networks, you should be maintaining all kinds of business relationships. And it's not hard. It just does take time. It does take energy. You get out of relationships what you put into them. So if you don't spend time investing time, you've gone from 2 hours a day to 4 hours a day in this introduction. Sounds like a lot of social media time. I don't know that I could ever advocate that somebody should spend that much time, or that people have that much time.
Right.
I do it because I do it for a living, so I kind of live there all the time. But yeah, you do have to invest time for sure every day in having relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is required? I think, as you were saying, like a lot of people want the followers, but they're not followable. A lot of people, it's the eye through the needle. And I know in myself that I'm working through some behavioral roadblocks, logistical roadblocks, and I have to change to be able to participate in this new world. I have to change. Is there anything required for you that you're in the process of identifying and actually working through? You're asking specifically about behaviors for me, or what I would advocate somebody should do if they want to build their personal brand. Yeah. Is that what you're thinking? I think what I love is that what I think will make our program unique is that people are willing to share their own personal process so I actually would love you to share what you're willing to share based on a professional perspective, but also to the degree you feel safe, right? Share maybe something that is really part of your, evolution.
Yeah, I've been, I've been so, I'm one of those folks that social media really serves my need to be an extrovert and an introvert at the same time, sometimes referred to as an ambivert. So I do feel like I'm one of those folks, and I think there's lots of people like me, maybe like us, who are in certain situations comfortable being outgoing and engaging and revealing of themselves, and in other situations are more inward looking. The beauty of social, when you go to an event, there's a certain personality that you can see them. You might call it the politician personality, that they're comfortable meeting lots of people. They're comfortable having small talk, and they're, they initiate those kinds of activities. And I find in social networking, you can do that on your own terms more. And I found that I like that I like sitting in front of my computer, my machine, having access to resources, information, insights, being able to write things down. I mean, a huge part to me of my own work, and I would encourage other people to think this way, is that until you write down your thoughts, whether you're writing a blog, you're writing an article, you often don't know for sure what you're thinking. And the requirement of writing it, forces you to clarify your thoughts in words, which is harder than you think. And in doing that, you can sort of clarify what you really think about something, what your opinion is. And so, these are things that I've tried with varying degrees of success over the years in doing my own brand building activities, is, write consistently in order to clarify what you're thinking, and invest that time in getting to know people and really sharing yourself. I mean, I believe your personal branding activity is about being your brand and being yourself as much as you can in a strange online distant situation often. But yeah, it's a, that's what's required, is this constant, I think, commitment to be learning new things, right? I mean, it's this constant environment of changing technologies, changing platforms, and the need to learn.
Right. Do you have a way to close things down and create some privacy for yourself and your family? And how do you turn off? Because, this is actually a real question I have. I have a hard time creating, I've started closing doors and working in certain rooms and doing things to kind of signal to my kids when I'm available, when I'm not available. But how do you create separation between your work life and your private life? This is I'm seeking this myself. This is authentic.
I think I gave up the separation when I made a trade, and the trade I said was, I want flexibility more than separation.
Ooh.
So I, for years I've worked from home, and my wife worked outside of the house, and I was a home-based business person. I was also a primary parent when my kids were younger, and I took care of my family, and I cooked the meals, and I shopped, and I booked the appointments and the play dates and all those kinds of things. So what I traded off, and I got a huge amount of flexibility. I could do even the nature of the work I do, I can do virtually any hour of the day, any day of the week, from any location. And in exchange, and I got a huge amount of flexibility to do what I needed to do in the afternoon when the kids come home, or prepare dinner, or do all those kinds of things. But what I traded off was I don't have a separation, is that my life is sort of a constant interplay of work and personal priorities. And I personally think that's the best way for me to work. I mean, this idea that you go to a place in an office, you have to commute there, you have to sit down at a desk, do your work there. This makes no sense to me. It's never made any sense to me as a way of getting productivity from people that you want to do things. So I thrive in that freedom and flexibility of in exchange, I give up the separation.
You bring up another point too, that the only thing I really kind of do miss between meetings is the driving, because the driving created kind of a forced separation between events and different things. And I'm a single mom, and I have a friend that's a father that's very engaged. And anytime I say single mom, he says, just say single parent. So I want to reiterate that to all the fathers that are out there that are doing great work, raising their children in addition to their career. I don't think that we acknowledge that enough. And I loved the way that you answered that, indicated your commitment as a father, and that's pretty cool as well. When you looked at the Proust questionnaire, and I used the Proust questionnaire as a way to frame after the call, we'll make it look beautiful and put the logo on it and all of that. But is there anything in the questions that you really liked and were glad that I asked?
Well, the whole questionnaire I really enjoyed, because it really forced me to go back and, first of all, it's very literature focused. I wished you'd ask more questions about music, because if I was going to say what's my muse or my inspiration, it's more musical arts than it is literary arts today. But it did make me go back and recall my some of my favorite fiction writers and novels, and it was. It's a great opportunity for me to look back and think of the influences. As I mentioned, I studied philosophy, and but I really feel like it was an opportunity for me to go back and get in touch with some of the things that really inspired me. And that, I think that was the thing that I found so interesting about it, is that I hadn't realized some of these things until you asked me, and I realized, that really has been pretty important to me. So I did have a really hard time identifying heroes or literary characters that I identified with, but I had no trouble with some of the quotes. I do quotes all the time, and there's just so many insightful folks that inspire me every day. So it was very interesting.
Well, I think that I thought I had included movies in there, but maybe I need to go back and revisit it, as well as the fact that I'm always in iterative design mode. And so I was certainly, the next series of guests, except for the guests that we haven't scheduled so far, I can absolutely add favorite album, favorite song, favorite pop culture aspect, and or movie. Because the issue isn't to make it about literature, although I do have a bias read to lead. It is really to bring out, people are more than their expertise. And then I just also, it's so clear that's true to you, because you had mentioned that you had looked at my YouTube song preferences and found the wonderful Queen and the Soldier. And I'm having a hard time with the artist. I'm like, Suzanne Vega. Suzanne Vega. So what I would love, can you share if you had the questions that were best for you in terms of your influences, can you share an influence that you would have named?
I'm just all over the map with music, and I sometime in my late 20s I discovered opera, so I'm quite a fan of very particular Italian opera. So the Puccini Verdi quality of opera is about 100 years old, still modern, very, very big on that. Miles Davis, I'm a huge fan of Miles Davis. There was a great documentary last year, highly recommended, Birth of the Cool. And that whole era of late 50s, early 60s jazz just really speaks to me. But I'm a folk fan, and I'm a huge fan of Joni Mitchell, who was really a Canadian and world folk icon. But so I'm all over the map with music, but I'm a huge fan. I even have my son has even figured out in the way he's going to cope with the pandemic is he's going to go to the basement late at night and record his own music. So that's very exciting for me too, that my kids are inspired to do music. Because to me, it's not so much about performance with music. It's a language of reality and existence and spirit and soul that I think is so important for people just to appreciate, because it just adds so much joy to life.
Wow. And sometimes I have people read poetry at the end of it, but I think the sentence that you just said about the value of music is an incredible way to end this program. Jay Palter, all over the world on Twitter, and all over our mindset in how we can actually build connections in a virtual space in order to find out who we really want to meet and give that eye contact to. Thank you for your time today. It's really great, and I look forward to more conversations. All the best.
I do too, Jennifer. Thank you.
This is Jennifer Sertl at Studio A3R, produced by Scott Fitzgerald. And I don't know why I always do that when I go Scott Fitzgerald. I do. I'm like, I have this thing with a Z, Scott Fitzgerald with a Z. I also want to thank Anthony Molina for designing that amazing music that begins our program. And we look forward to next Monday. Take care.